This right here is The Last Chancers. It's a book with quite a bit of battle damage. All right. So Cage and his friends are an asteroid moon thing. I was right. The tunnel led directly to their nest, about 200 meters from the shuttle. There's a massive cavern, the wall too far distant to see the light of the photolamps. There's one more refill for each of the flamers, which might not be enough, because there's thousands of the creatures. They seem to be in some disarray, swarming haphazardly over the place, covering the floor and scuttling along the walls and roof. Like before, they're not paying us any attention, and I lead the squad further into the chamber. I can see another 4 tunnels leading off the cave, some heading up, others heading down. It's quite a network they've chewed themselves out down here. I wonder if the authorities at the penal colony knows what's happening right under their feet. Sir, Jordan attacks my attention with a terse whisper, jerking his head to one side. Looking over that direction, I see a mass of yellow alien eggs, little fleshy sacs about the size of your thumb. They stretch across the floor in a rough circle, spreading beyond the beam of the photolamp. Tens of thousands of them. In the ruddy glare of the photolamps, I can make out a larger, darker shape. It's about a meter tall, bloated atop dozens of spindly legs, sitting on a pile of eggs at its center. I reckon that's the breeder, Darwin says with a meaningful look. Let's torch it, I snarl, grabbing Darwin's flavor and heading towards the mother bug. It turns its head towards us as we reach the edge of the egg pile, a cluster of eggs staring back at me, a look of intelligence in them. I raise the flamer and point it directly at the breeder, smiling grimly inside my mask. Then I notice movement to my left and right. The other guardsmen have noticed it too and start backing away from the eggs. From the side tunnels, another sort of creature is scuttling into view. They stand waist high on 10 many jointed legs, with vicious looking horns jutting from their insect like heads. More and more of them are pouring in, hastening behind us to cut off our retreat. Run for it, I bellowed, pulling the trigger of the flamer, engulfing the mother alien in flames, seeing it writhe for a moment in the fires before collapsing on itself. The air is filled with a hissing sound, and the soldier bugs, I guess that's what they are, rush forwards, moving rapidly on their many legs. The others are already heading for the tunnel, and I pound after them, jetting the flamer to my left, and a couple of times, as the aliens get too close, one of the soldiers scuttles up the wall around the tunnel entrance and hurls itself at Jorit, landing on his shoulders and clamping its legs around his face. He screams as it drives its horns into his throat, spraying blood as the sergeant falls to the floor. In his death spasms, the sergeant's fingers tighten on the trigger of the flamer, sending a gout of fire searing across the back of one of the other guardsmen. Mallory. Mallory flounders for a moment as the flames lick up his fatigues and catch his hair on fire. He comes flailing towards me, his skin melting and bubbling around his rebreather mask, eyes staring wide through the visor, and I have to leap to my right to stop him from grabbing a hold of me. He falls flat on his face, gurgling shrieks issuing from his lips. His claws, his hands, he claws at his face for a moment as his mask melts into his flesh before collapsing and lying still. I haven't got time to give him a second thought, though. Two of the soldiers are between me and the tunnel, legs constricting, ready to jump. A flame whooshes out the tunnel, incinerating the aliens in an instant, ashes wafting around in the heat of the fire. I see Thesson standing there, waving me on. Leaping over the charred, smoldering corpses of the soldier, I head to the tunnel. They sure make the flamethrowers sound dangerous. They sure make them sound dangerous. I'll say that. In the forest, the flamethrower blew up, and it like took out a bunch of the tree and a bunch of people, and then yeah, as a soldier, I once had to ask myself if I would have the guts, if it came down to it when I was dying, if I would just die with honor, if I drag someone down with me. It's a pretty good question you should ask yourself, because when you're dying, things change rapidly, I would imagine. I hope they get off this stupid asteroid soon. This side quest is... It's okay. It's okay. We make a fighting withdrawal down the passage toward the shuttle. Thesson, Lamex, and I take it in turns to hold back the pursuing aliens before falling back past the next flamer men. It takes us another 10 minutes to get back to the cave when we make our stand at the tunnel entrance. Lamax is on point when I see he's aiming too low. Some of the soldiers are scuttling along the roof of the passage. I shout out, but it's too late. One of them drops on him, spikes piercing his shoulder. Davin grabs the thing and flings it away, and I drag Lamax out of the way as Thesson steps up to take his place. The first burst from his flamer scouring the ceiling. Lamax is trying to search for the wound. I hold his hand away, kneeling on his chest to stop him flashing around too much. The puncture is too deep, but doesn't look too bad until I see a thick, tar-like substance smeared with the blood. Poison, probably. Lamax recognizes the look on my face and glances at his shoulder, eyes wide with horror. Tears of pain roll down his cheek, pooling at the bottom of his visor. With a lunge, he pushes me off his chest, wrenching the knife from my belt. I make a grab of it to get it back, but I'm not quick enough. He rams it into his chest, up to the hilt. Right, I shout, standing up and pushing the others away from where they'd clustered around Lamax's body. Everyone share a rebreather and get back to the shuttle. Leave the rest for me. What the frag are you talking about, sir? Demands Thesson over his shoulder. We don't know how long it's going to take to fix the shuttle engines, I explain hurriedly, jabbing a finger down the tunnel to remind Thesson to keep watch. One man can hold this tunnel just as well as all of us. If you give me your mask, I'll be able to stay longer than if everyone stands out here together. You get back on board, insists Darvin, picking up Larmox's flamer, and I'll hold him off. Don't even think about arguing with me on this one, I snap back. This ain't no self-sacrifice crap. I just don't trust you not to get yourselves killed. Now give me that flamer and get your sorry hide into that shuttle. They exchange glances with each other. But then they see the determined look on my eye. I see them give up the fight. Thetson looks away, firing a final burst of fire down the tunnel, before hooking the strap of his flamer off his shoulder and leaving the weapon against the wall. Soon as you run out of fuel or air, get inside, he says fiercely, staring at me, daring me to contradict him. Get out of my sight, I say, shooing him away with a wave of the flamer. I'm left on my own with 3 flamers and about an hour's worth of air. I hope it's enough, because one way or another, if it isn't, I'm a dead man. I fended off another half dozen attacks over a quarter of an hour when Thenson comes running up beside me. I've already had to swap mask once, and the tank on the one I'm wearing is getting low. What the frag are you doing here? I demanded, pushing him back towards the shuttle. The Colonel sent me to tell you that the main power has been restored, he says, batting my arm away. It'll be another half hour before we can ignite the takeoff thrusters. Do you reckon you can hang out that long? Flamer's almost out. The others are both half full, I reassure him. He nods and heads back to the shuttle, glancing one more time over his shoulder. My attention is back on the tunnel as I see another wave of aliens scuttling towards me. I fire the last shot from the flamer and then toss it to one side, grabbing another from beside me and opening it up again straight away. It's going to be a long half hour. I jar awake, feeling something touching me, flailing around weakly with my arms. I try to fend off the soldier aliens. One of them rips the mask off, and I feel something clamber down my face. Suddenly, my lungs fill with fresh air, and I can feel myself being dragged across the ground. As my vision returns, I see Thesson firing a flamer up the tunnel before grabbing it by the stock and hurling it down the passage, shouting something I can't hear. As I'm bundled up the ramp, I see a wave of blackness pour over and around the guardsman, flooring him. Spikes rise and fall, stabbing repeatedly onto his body, blood spurting from deep wounds. With a whine, the ramp begins to close, obscuring the scene. We're in! I hear somebody call behind me. I'm laid flat on my back, and I stare at the glow globe in the ceiling, entranced by its yellow light. It seems blindingly bright after the cave, but I keep staring at it. The floor beneath me begins to shake violently as I feel the increase in weight that indicates we've taken off. Out of focus faces cluster into my vision. People talk, but rather voices are just a mixed up blurbling. As I close my eyes and concentrate on filling my lungs as much as possible. The jury-rigged shuttle managed to make it the score of kilometers to the penal colony, where the colonel commandeered one of theirs to take us back to the pride of Lothis. The tech priest died from his feedback injury when we reached the colony, and when we left the body, we left it there. As we're disembarking into the transport shuttle bay, I approach the colonel. You didn't leave anyone behind, sir, I point out. You're exactly right. I did not, he replies, watching the guardsmen plodding exhaustingly down the ramp. And we're not getting any new recruits either, I suggest. Watching his face for some betrayal of what he might be thinking, but there's nothing at all. You are not, he confirms, finally turning to look at me. Why, sir? I asked after a moment, wondering if I just need to ask, like he said with Lauren and Laurie's story. None of them were good enough, is all he says, looking straight at me and then turning to walk away. Good enough for what? I ask, trotting after him. You are full of questions today, Cage, he says, striding across the mesh decking. He looks over his shoulder at me, sizing me up, and then seems to reach a decision. Come with me back to my chamber. The armsmen know how to get your men back to the holding pen. We walk in silence, my head spinning with thoughts. What was he going to show me? Or was he going to give me a dressing down in private, not wanting to spoil discipline by taking a few lumps off of me in front of the troopers? Then again, it's never stopped him before. The colonel keeps glancing at me as we ascend through the decks on the ironwork escalator. The sudden turn of events both worries and excites me. As we walk down the corridor towards the study, one of the robe-shrouded flunkies approaches from the other direction. He gives me a startled look, but doesn't say anything. We follow the colonel inside, and he closes the door behind us. Show Lieutenant Cage the documents, Schaefer tells the clerk, sitting down behind the desk. The robed man pulls a bundle of parchments from a voluminous sleeve and hands them to me. I scroll, I unroll the top one and place the others on the corner of the colonel's desk. It's written in a large flowing script. It's in high Gothic, so I can't understand much of what's written. However, I do recognize the title. It says, Absolvis Imperius Felonium Unma, which I take it means, the Emperor absolves you of all your sins. At the bottom of it is a heavy wax seal with the mark of the commissariat, and above it I see Jorit's name. Startled, I look at the others, and they are for Lamax and the rest of them. Pardons for the dead men? I ask confusedly. Absolution can be awarded posthumously, the clerk tells me with an utter sincerity, as easily as commendations and medals. Does anyone else get one of these? I ask, turning to the colonel. He just nods once, staring intently at me. You really are mad, I think to myself, as I look at him, sitting in his leather-bound chair, fingers steepled out in front of him. Only the Emperor can grant eternal and unbounded absolution. You know my promise, the colonel says. The first words he's uttered to me since we left the shuttle hangar. I gave you a last chance. If you die in my service, you have earned the right for absolution. It means a number of things. It is not just sophistry. Your name can be entered into the imperial annals as serving the emperor and doing your duty. If we know who you are, your children will be taken for by the school of Progenium. Your families will be contacted and told the matter of your death. And if you don't die, I ask, suddenly worried. Everybody dies, Lieutenant. Sooner or later. That will be all, Lieutenant Cage, he says. No hint of emotion at all. I snap my mouth shut and salute, fuming inside. Clericus Amadale here will summon an armsman to return you to your men. The colonel finishes, indicating the door with an open hand and a slight tilt of the head. The sound of constant bombardment was dull and muffled inside the command center, reduced to a distant thudding. Inside the operations room, everything was organized chaos as scribes and logisticians scurried to and forth, carrying information detailing the latest enemy offensive. In the center of the room, amid banks of dials and tactical displays, a hololith projector showed a schematic diagram of the fortress, red blinking icons indicating the positions of enemy formations, blue symbols representing the positions of defenders, mustering to their places to fend off the assault. Two officers stood beside the hololith, resplendent in their deep blue iron coats with gold braiding. One, with five studs of a commander general on his epaulets, pointed to an area to the southwest. This looks like a divisionary attack, he commented to his fellow officer, whose rank marking showed him to be a captain. Bring Ellipsen Brigade back to the Westfall, and push forward with the 23rd along their flank. The captain called over a scribe with a wave of his hand and passed on the order in clipped tones. He turned back his gray-haired superior, his face a picture of worry. How can we continue to fight, sir? He asks, fingers tapping nervously on the golden hilt of the sword hanging on his left thigh. They seem to have limitless numbers, and we are willing to throw in thousands just to test our reactions. Don't worry, Jonathan, the commander general assured him. Help is on the way. And when it arrives, we will be safe. And what of the other problem? The captain inquired in an agitated fashion, his voice dropping to a terse whisper. What of the enemy within? There is only one of them, the commander general replied in the same hushed tones. They will be caught and removed, and the small threat will pass. Nothing is going to stop us now. What I like about this book is it's essentially a compilation of short stories that really just let you see across the 41st millennia. Operation Harvest entering final stage. What is the status of Operation New Sun? New Sun entering pivotal phase. Operation Harvest will be completed as soon as possible. Time is short. We'll make speed for New Sun location. I've never seen the colonel so angry before. I thought I'd seen him get mad, but that was just mild annoyance compared to his current performance. His eyes are so hard, they could chip Rockreed, and his skin is almost white. His jaw is clenched so tight that I can see the muscles twitching in his cheeks. Captain Farron isn't all that happy either. The ship's commander is flushed and sweating, scowling at the colonel. And there's me, caught in the middle of it. I'd just been reporting the latest weapon stock check to the colonel when the captain came in and told him we were altering course to respond to a general alarm call. The colonel told him flat that they weren't going anywhere and to bring us back to our original heading. And then things started getting ugly. You know my standing orders, Colonel Schaefer, hisses the captain, leaning on the front of the colonel's desk with balled fists, his thick shoulders level with his chin. May I remind you that this vessel has been seconded to me For transportation, Captain, Schaefer spits back, standing up from his big chair and pacing to look over the viewport. It is a high treason offense not to respond to a general alarm signal. The captain barks at Colonel Schaefer. There is no overriding situation or a countermanding order from a superior officer. This vessel is at my disposal, the colonel says quietly. And that's when I know things are getting really dangerous. The colonel's one of those men whose voice gets quieter the nearer to going over the edge he is. I am giving you a countermanding order, Captain. I am just the most senior officer on this vessel, Colonel, the captain tells him, pulling himself up stiffly, clenching and unclenching his fist behind his back. This is naval jurisdiction. I am in command of this ship. I have the highest authority. You know what I am talking about, Captain, yells the colonel, spinning on his heel to confront Farron. I am giving you a direct order. With all that authority behind it, you will return us to our original course for Typhus Prime. Your authority does not extend to overruling the naval articles of war, Colonel, the captain says with a shake of his head. After we have reported for duty at Cragmere, I will reconsider. This is my final word on the matter. If you don't like it, you can get out of the nearest airlock and make yourself your own way. With that, the captain storms out of the study, the heavy doors slamming shut behind him. I can't shake the image of the colonel lining us up and marching us out of an airlock, like Farron suggested. He's probably mad enough to do it. The colonel looks as if he's going to go after Captain Farron for a moment, before he pulls himself short. He takes a deep breath, straightens his greatcoat, and then turns to me. What do we have in the way of cold weather equipment, Cage? He asks suddenly. I hesitate, taken aback, and he points to the data slab with the inventory on its back. What for? I stammer back, regretting it instantly when he glowers at me. Get out, Cage! He snaps back at me, snatching the data slab from my hand and waving me away with it. I give a hurried salute and bolt for the door, glad to be out of the colonel's sight while he's in his dangerous mood. So, they're going to Cragmere. Actually, he's about to say what they're going to Cragmere for. This one right here, this next short story, it's kind of, I mean, it's like a chapter, right? But I think it's more of a short story. It just shows how the colonel operates. You know, with the bad things, right? You can have them all at once, or you can have them over time, and you can go back and forth to decide which one's better. You know, sometimes it's better just getting it out of the way, but I don't know. In the Last Chancers, nobody really gets to leave, but they've been fighting the Last Chancers for like over a year. So, I mean, it can't be that bad if there's still some people alive out of 4,000 people. There's still like 50 people left. No, 40 people left. And so it's not that bad. That one chick, Lori, she was like, "Yeah, the fighter bombers came in and blew away everyone in the company except for me and my brother." And that one guy was like, "Epic." That was a pretty cool part. Another 2 weeks of warp dreams, and we drop into the Cragmere system. We're here to fight orcs, the colonel tells me. On an ice world, unfortunately. Locked in a permanent ice age, Cragmere is one huge tundra, scoured by snowstorms and covered in glaciers and jagged mountains. Fighting orcs is bad enough, but fighting them in those harsh conditions is going to be a damn near impossible task. I fought orcs before, when a group of slave raiders tried raiding the world I was garrisoned on before I became a last chancer. They're huge green monsters, not much taller than a man, because they stoop constantly, but really broad and muscular, with long, ape like arms. They would bite off your head with their massive jaws, and they have sharp claws too. We've also got pretty good guns, though their armor usually isn't worth a damn. Then again, they don't need much armor. They can survive injuries that would cripple or kill a human. I don't know how they do it, but they hardly bleed at all. They don't seem to register pain very easily. I think we patched, bolted, and stapled back together in the crudest fashion and still fight with almost full effectiveness. I've seen warriors with rough and ready bionics, huge, hissing pistons in their arms or legs, actually making them stronger, with guns or slashing blades built into the limb. No mistake, even a few orcs are bad news, but apparently a few thousand dropped into Cragmere several weeks ago. Still, we've got a week of in system travel before we reach orbit, so I go through cold weather survival with the few dozen last chancers left on board. Once again, the conversation has turned to just how useful we can be, but with less than a platoon of men. Apparently, there's another penal legion on the surface already. 3 whole companies. That's about 500 to 1,000, depending upon the size of the companies. Who knows? Maybe the colonel will just wedge us into their organization and leave us there. Somehow, I don't think that's going to happen, though. The more things happen, and Franks agrees with me on this one, the more it seems that the colonel's got something in mind for us. I mean, if he's just trying to get us all killed, Cragmere is as good a place as any. So why the big fight with the ship's captain? And what's this authority he says he has? As far as I know, the only non naval rank who can command a ship to do anything is a war master. And that's because it takes the nomination of at least 2 admirals to make you a war master to start off with. Well, so they told us when they explained at the local ranking system when I joined up. And there's also the colonel's comment about the convicts from the last penal colony not being any good. It all makes me wonder what's going on. We're down in the main launch bay, driving Chimera infantry fighting vehicles into the shuttles, ready for transport down to the surface. The steady chugging of well tuned engines echoes off the high vaulted ceiling, the tang of diesel fumes filling the air. Raiding work parties clamber out on the cranes and gantries, preparing them for when they have to launch the shuttles. The colonel had a Navy tech priest look over at our chimeras, bearing in mind the freezing conditions they'll be operating in. We've got good vegetative processors loaded on board the chimeras in case we need to chop down trees to fuel them. Blizzard filters have been installed over the intakes and exhausts, and double graded ignition systems fitted to the chargers to make sure they don't ice over. I, for one, wouldn't like to foot it across Cragmere to get wherever we're going. Apparently, we're going to have to land near one of the Imperial bases and then get to the front line from there. The storm season is just starting, making any travel impossible except right on the plains where we're landing, some 45 kilometers from the fighting. A piercing shrill goes across the rumbling of the engines, bringing everybody back to an instant standstill. Alert! Alert! Shouts one of the ratings, helping us with the loading of my half friend Jameson. Cage, get your man over to the gantry if they want to see something interesting. Everybody crowds up the metal steps to get a view through the massive armored windows. I can't see anything yet except for the plasma trails of the 2 frigates that jumped out of the warp just after us. Apparently on the other side of us is the cruiser, Justice of Terra, but I never had the chance to see her. There, hisses Jameson, pointing to a movement to his left. I cup my hands around his face and push my nose against the armor glass, trying to block out the light so I can see better. Then I can see it. Nothing more than a shooting star at this range, sweeping past the furthest frigate. I hope there aren't too many of the Eldar, Jameson mutters, shaking his head. We're not built for combat. Transports usually act as part of a convoy. How do you know it's Eldar? Asks Scappo incredulously from my recite. Watch how they turn, Jameson tells us. Nodding towards the window, I strain my eyes for a few minutes before I see the orange red spark again. Then I see what Jameson means. The pinprick of light slows for a second or two, and then speeds off in another direction entirely. Even burning retros and working the maneuvering thrusters to maximum, one of our ships could never churn that tightly. Nowhere near that tightly, in fact. As I watch, I see a tiny flicker of blue erupt around the blob of light that I identified as one of the frigates. The frigate seems to glow a little bit brighter as its shields absorb the attack. I can feel the energies of the Pride of Lothis forcing us away from the battle. A rumbling that seems to react with the pulsing of the ship to create a stomach churning vibration. Frag me, whispers Franks, looking up. I glance through the uppermost part of the window and see the lights moving across my field of vision. I realize it's the Justice of Terra, powering across us, over the top of the transport, just a few kilometers away. She's immense. Even through the blast filter tint of the armor glass, I can see the directional engines burning briefly into life along her port side, pushing her a bit further from us. Her plasma drives start to come into view, huge cylinders crisscrossed by countless kilometers of massive pipes and cables, feeding vital power from the plasma reactors deep within her armored hull. The brightness of the plasma trails is almost blinding, even through the darkened glass. White hot energy spilling from her engine tubes, hurling her through space at an incredible speed, although her size and weight make her look preponderous. No, not preponderous. It's more stately, a serenity that belays the awesome amounts of energy she's using. She's an inspiring sight. There's no doubt about that. And I can see why many a young man fantasizes about growing up to be a ship's captain, commanding one of those deadly behemoths. Watching the cruiser forging her way through the Eldar, towards the Eldar, I feel a sense of security. Surely nothing could stand up to the attention of that gigantic engine of destruction. The Navy may have some strange ideas about strategy and defense, but you have to hand it to them. They know a hell of a lot about firepower. Their anti ordnance defense turrets have weapons larger than those carried on Titans. Their barrels, over 10 meters long, dozens of point defenses studded the hull of the ship, the size of a cruiser. Their broadsides vary. Sometimes they have huge plasma cannons capable of incinerating cities. Other times it's mass drivers that can pound metal and rock into oblivion. Short range missile batteries can obliterate a smaller foe in a matter of minutes, while high energy lasers, which Jameson tells me are called lances, can tear through 3 meters of the toughest armor with one devastating shot. Most cruisers carry huge torpedoes as well, loaded with simple warheads, charged with volatile plasma bombs, carrying the power to unleash the energy of a small star on the enemy. It makes my humble las pistol look like a spit in the ocean. More than 100 oceans, actually. When the Justice of Terra becomes nothing more than a spark in the distant battle, we began to lose interest. There's the flickering of gunfire, but from several thousand kilometers away, it's hard to see anything, really. I'm sure up on the gun decks and on the bridge, they've got ocular sensors and that stuff that allows them to have a better view. But down here, it's just an incredibly distant and faint light show. Okay, I tell the man as they begin to wander around from the window gallery. Let's finish loading the chimeras. We have 3 of the chimeras on board, one of the dropships, and we are getting to take another 2 to the other when the ratings start hurrying around us, a sudden panic stirring them into activity. I grab a warrant officer by the arm and he tries to dash past me. What's going on? I demanded, looking at the Navy man as they try to converge in the lockers at the rear of the shuttle bay. We've got the order to prepare boarders, he tells me, pulling my hand off his arm with a snarl. One of the Eldar pirates has doubled back and is coming straight for us. They lured the cruiser away, and now we're on our own. Look. He points out of the window, and I see a swirling shape approaching us speedily. I can't see the ship clearly. It's defended by what we call holofields, which twist and bend light so you can't see the exact location, and sends augers and sensors haywire. Another example of the infernal witchcraft the Eldar use in their weapons and machines. I'm about to ask somebody in contact with the Colonel when I see him walking through the blast doors at the far end of the shuttle bay. He glances out the windows, and I hurry over to him. We need to get armed, sir, I tell him. They're expecting a boarding action. I know, he replies, turning his attention to me. I see he has his power sword swinging in its scabbard from its belt, and a holster on the other hip for his bolt pistol. I have informed the armsmen. They will issue you with weapons once they have finished assembling the naval parties. Where should we be, sir? I ask as we walk towards the platoon. The Navy boys seem to know what they're doing. Can we help out? You're right. They can manage without us interfering, he agrees, pulling his bolt pistol out and cocking the safety off. We shall act as a reserve behind the Navy teams. If they look like they are faltering, we will advance and support them. That seems sensible. I'm all for staying behind the ratings and armsmen. After all, they're the ones trained for this sort of thing. In short range firefights and close melee, and they've got the heavy duty armor to keep them safe in that sort of scrap. While we're waiting for the armament to dish out weapons, I order the dropships secured, more to keep the men busy than because any fears that having them open will help the Eldar. We're finishing what the armsmen bring over. We're finishing that when the armsmen bring over a trolley of weapons. They start handing out shotguns and shell bandoliers to everyone. I grab one and sling it over my shoulder and then snatch a handle of electro gaffs, calling over the squad sergeants to take one each and keeping one for myself. Looking back out of the windows, I can see a fire of our measly batteries flaring towards the miasma of color that is the Eldar ship. It doesn't seem to be damaged at all. It changes course to come alongside us, slowing its speed to match ours. The whole ship shudders violently as the captain orders evasive maneuvers and retrojets spring into life, cutting our speed suddenly and hurling us sideways. This gives us a respite for only half a minute or so, before a livid purple stream of energy pours out of the cloud of shifting colors, striking us somewhere near the aft section and causing the ship to tremble under detonations. They have assembled, they have disabled the engines, the colonel says from behind me, his face grim as ever. Now they will board. I see smaller shapes detach themselves from the multicolored fog heading towards us. They must be using assault boats, I deduce. I can see half a dozen of them, and they seem to be heading straight for us. I think it must be an illusion, but then I perceive that they are actually heading straight for us. They grow larger and larger in the windows, and I hear the clattering of boots on the metal decking as more men pour into the shuttle bay from the surrounding areas. I push half a dozen cartridges into the chamber of the shotgun and pump them in ready to fire. Holding the electrogaff under my left arm, I herd the platoon back towards the wall, away from the windows and launch doors. Wait for the colonel's order and follow my lead, I shout out to them. I see a few of them glancing around, looking to see if there's an opportunity to get away, but I follow their gazes. I see that the doors have all been shut again. Glancing overhead, I notice a trio of Navy officers in the control room, looking out through the massive plate windows at their men below. They're here! I hear somebody bellowing from the front of the bay. I see the sleek, menacing shapes of the assault boats dropping down past the windows, each patterned in strange flowing stripes of red, black, and purple. A few seconds later, patches of the walls to either side of the launch doors grow blue as the assault boats use some kind of energy field to burn their way through. With an explosion of light, the first breach is made to my right, throwing sparks and debris into the decking. Almost at once, other detonations flare to my left and right, and the Navy parties begin to open fire, the thunder of their shotguns resounding around the large chamber. The flare of gunfire flickers across my vision, joined by the odd burst of light from las cannon or something similar. From where I am, I can't see anything of our attackers, but I can see men being hurled to the floor by blasts of dark energy or torn to shreds by hails of gunfire. Right in front of me, I see a pulsing star of blackness burst through the Navy ranks, smashing through a handful of men, tossing their charred bodies into the air and flinging several limbs and heads in all directions. Everyone seems to be shouting at once, adding to the cacophony of the gunfire. Hoarse screams of agony or panic echo off the walls, and the clatter of spent shell casings rings from the decking. The air stinks with the cordite from 200 shotguns, the stench of burnt flesh and abatur, smell of dismembered and decapitated bodies. As I glance around, trying to work out what the hell is going on, everything is in anarchy. Flashes of las fire mixing in with the bark of shotguns, and the shrill, whickering noise from the Eldar splinter rifles and cannons. It's impossible to see how many we're facing, or whether we're holding them back or not. I can see mounds of dead everywhere, men crawling away or holding onto mutilated limbs, or clasping wounds to their bodies and heads. Another explosion rocks the grates of the decking. A fireball blossoms to my right, where a generator or something goes up. Shots are whistling overhead now, impacting on the ironwork of the control tower support, hissing and bubbling as they melt through girders, holding the control room a dozen meters above the deck. A shuttle to my right bursts into a huge fireball, a spray of shrapnel scything through the men around it, cutting them down with a cloud of sharp-edged debris. "It is time," the colonel says, stepping forward, the pulsing blue of his power sword illuminating his face from beneath. He nods his head towards the right, where I can see the first of the alien warriors through the thin ranks of the Navy ratings and armsmen. They're wearing armor stripped to the same colors as their attack ships. Their armor is plated and covered in blades and spikes, which glisten in the erratic light of the firelight. They stand about a head taller than the men around them, but are slim to the point of being emaciated. They move with a graceful, flowing motion that seems entirely effortless, with a speed that the most hardened human fighter would find difficult to match. I see them cutting left, and right, with close combat weapons made of exotic blades and barbed whips. A man's head spins to the ground as one of them tears through his throat with a backlash from his sword, before tearing to his heel to plunge the blade to the stomach of another Navy man. There's an aura of malice about them, a ruthlessness betrayed by the odd laugh or extravagant gesture. There's one moment when the aliens in front of us stand on their own, about 2 dozen of them, with the dead and dying Navy men littering the deck around their feet. Without any order being needed, everybody opens fire at once, the heat from the volley washing over me and causing me to sweat out of my skin. I pump the shotgun and fire again, the haft of my gaff wedged between the top of the breech and under my arm, and I can see one of the Eldar thrown back by the impact, bright blood splattering onto the air. To our left, more come leaping towards us, easily cutting through the few men in their path. There's a thudding of booted feet to our right, and a squad of armsmen rush in to join us. "They're breaking through towards the main corridor," their petty officer screams, gesturing towards the far end of the bay with his assault shotgun, his visor pushed back, and I see his hate-filled snarl as he opens up with a shotgun. A dozen shots crashing to the approaching Eldar in the space of a few seconds. Pulsing the drum magazine from the shotgun and firing again, he waves his men past us. I see Donaldson leading a squad after them, and I let them go. The colonel stands to my left, power sword in one hand, bolt pistol leveled at the enemy with the other. Fighting withdrawal to the command center. He snaps over his shoulder at me. We're firing a burst of rounds into the Eldar as they head towards us. Fall back by squads. I bellow over the din of the firefight. Jor and command squad up front. I see the other men falling back towards the rear of the bay as I kneel to slam another 6 shells into the shotgun. Getting to my feet, I see the other last chancers are in position, and I begin to walk backwards, firing round after round from the shotgun. The other squad's covering fire blasting past me into the aliens. The dead are heaped everywhere now, ours and theirs. Bloody body parts scattered across the metal decking. The deep crimson of human blood mixing with the brighter red of alien life fluid. I can't tell how many of them there are, but as I pull back past the other squad, I can see that the fighting is still raging fiercely to my left as the Eldar attempt to break through the main doors and into the ship's interior. If they get out, they have an almost direct route to the bridge, the colonel informs me as he ejects the magazine on his bolt pistol and slides another into place. We must stop them from getting out of the shuttle bay. Glancing over my shoulder, I see that we're at the steps of the command tower. You can follow the trail of our retreat. 5 dead last chancers lie there, and 24 more alien bodies and a swath of shotgun cases and bolt pistol cartridges litter the floor. A few Eldar managed to dart through our fusillade, almost naked except for a few pieces of bladed red armor strapped across vital body parts. Almost skipping with light steps, they duck left and right with unnatural speed. In their hands, they hold vicious-looking whips and 2-bladed daggers that drip with some kind of venom that smokes as it drops the metal decking. Their fierce grins show exquisitely white teeth as they close in for the kill, their bright oval eyes burning with unholy passion. The colonel counterattacks, followed by Lorne and Laurie. Schaefer ducks under a venom blade and opens fire with his bolt pistol, blasting the face of his attacker. Lawrence spins on his heel to send the butt of a shotgun crashing to the midriff of another, grabbing the gun and bringing the muzzle up to the alien's face, snapping its neck with a blow. Laurie sidesteps between the two of them, weaving to her right, as one makes a lunge at her, grabbing the female Eldar's arm and whipping it around, sending the slender female creature tumbling to the blade of its comrade. One-handed, she fires the shotgun into the stomach of another, spraying shredded entrails across her white skin, dyeing her hair with bright red blood. Get the men to the control tower, the colonel orders me, bounding past me up the metal steps. The aliens continue to fire as we hurry up the open stairwell, cutting down 2 men from Sloveni's squad and pitching them over the railing. I see the sergeant turn around and push his squad back over the few steps, returning fire to hold back the aliens as they race across the open deck towards us. My breath explodes out of my mouth in ragged gasps as I pound up the spiral stairs, forcing my aching legs to keep going. But below us, I can see the Eldar have almost reached the main gateway. Only a couple dozen of armsmen stand between them and the locked doorway. It's with a sense of enormous relief that I tumble through the door of the control room, the other men piling after me and pitching me onto the floor. The colonel grabs me by the shoulder of my flakjack and hauls me to my feet. Seal that, he tells someone behind me, using his spare hand to point over my shoulder at the control room door. The door closes with a hiss of air and a dull thud. 3 dazed naval officers stand looking at us with a mixture of surprise and horror. Do you know how to blow the launch doors? The colonel demands, letting go of me and stepping to the nearest one. But below the doors, there's still men fighting down there, the officer responds, his face a mask of horror. They'll be dead soon anyway, the colonel snarls grimly, pushing the man to one side and stepping up to the next. The doors, Lieutenant? You can't just flick a switch, he says. The crank wheel on the back wall is the gateway pressure release valve. He points to a wheel about 3 meters across with 20 spokes. It's connected by a huge chain to a massive series of gears that disappears into the ceiling. It's locked into the barring mechanism that keeps the door shut. Open the valves, and the internal pressure within the bay will blow the doors out completely. This tower is on a separate system. It should be able to maintain pressure balance. Do it, the colonel hisses over his shoulder before looking back at the shuttle bay. Sloveni and Donaldson's squad are still out there, I argued, a lump in my throat. You can't order me to kill my own men. I am giving you a direct order, Lieutenant Cage, he says as he turns to me, his voice very low, his eyes glittering dangerously. We are all dead. If they reach the bridge, I can't do it, sir, I plead. Thinking of Sloveni and his men going back to hold off the Eldar to make sure that we got up here. Do it now, Lieutenant Cage, Schaefer whispers, leaning very close, right in front of my face, those eyes lasering their way through mine into my brain. I flinch under that terrible gaze. Okay, everyone grab a spoke at the wheel, I call out to the others, turning away from the colonel's murderous stare. They start to argue, but soon I shut them up, using the butt of my shotgun to smash Cormandaria across the jaw when he starts shouting obscenities at me. Maintain discipline, Cage, Schaefer barks from behind me. You have 5 seconds to turn that wheel before I shoot you myself, I growl at them, wondering if my eyes are filled with the same psychopathic glare I just seen in the colonel's. Without a further word, they hurl themselves at the wheel valve. It creaks and grinds as they turn it. On a panel above their heads, the needles on the dials begin to drop. With a sudden release of tension, the wheel spins rapidly, throwing to the floor in all directions. As they get to their feet, an ominous creaking noise resounds toward us. I look back out the window to see the launch doors begin to buckle under the strain. The huge doors, 3 meters thick, give way to a loud screeching, each one weighing several tons, ripping off their massive hinges and flung into the darkness. All hell breaks loose on the shuttle bay deck, as shuttles, dropships, chimeras, men, and Eldar are sucked into the air by the escaping atmosphere. Men are whirled everywhere. One of them, who looks like Sloveni, bounces off the hull of a spinning shuttle, his blood spraying wildly and violently from his face in the low pressure, sucking the life out of him in an instant. I can't hear their screams over the wind rushing. A howling gale tearing through the shuttle bay, throwing men and machines into oblivion. It's one of the most horrific sights I've ever seen. Seeing everything rushing out of the jagged gap on the far wall, pitching them into the vacuum to a horrible death. Ice begins to form on the outside of the control tower, frosting over the glass. Condensation from our breath beating quickly on the inside. I give a worried glance at the Navy officers, but they're staring in a horrified fashion at the carnage in the shuttle bay. I hear several of the last chancers behind me, swearing and cursing. I look at the colonel, and he stood there, totally immobile, watching the destruction outside with no sign of any emotion. Rage boils up inside me. He knew this was going to happen. As soon as the Eldar attacked, he knew it had come to this. Don't ask me how he knew, or how I know he knew, but he did. I dropped the shotgun and electrogaff and balled my hands into fists. Like a warm flood, the anger flows through me, into my legs and arms, filling me with strength. And I'm about to hurl myself at the colonel when he just turns to look at me. I see the twitch of muscles in his jaw and a resigned look in his eyes, and I realize he's not totally without compassion. He might have seen this coming, but he doesn't look happy about it. The anger suddenly bleeds away into the air around me, leaving me feeling sick and exhausted. I drop to my knees and bury my face in my hands, rubbing at my eyes with my knuckles. Shock sweeps over me, and I realize that I killed them. The colonel made me kill all of them. The aliens, the ratings, the armsmen, the last chancers. He made me do it, and I made the others do it. I hate him for that more than I hate him for anything he's done to me. Truly, I wish he was dead.